Good morning. We are going to convene the September 19 ABTEL meeting. Again, here, thank you so much for being here. I'm Dr. Joan Johnson, Assistant Superintendent, Teacher Ed and Licensure. At this time, we'll have a call attendance. If you could, please introduce yourself and who you represent on the board. And we'll be documenting that with our roster as well as various voting membership. So Nancy, would you like to begin?
I'm Nancy Bradley. I'm a citizen at large on the board, and I'm the director or assistant director of the Office of Academic Programs at Virginia Tech.
I'm Janine Connolly. I teach fourth grade at King George County Schools, and I represent Region 3.
Hi, I'm Carrie Swore. I represent the business slot. I'm new to the board. I have my own education consulting company, but I'm also a parent in Henrico County Public Schools.
Good morning. My name is David White. I'm with King William County Public Schools, and I represent Region 3 superintendents.
Good morning. My name is Malik McKinley. I serve as a Director of Client Relations for Educational Testing Service, and I'm a visitor.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Travis Burns. I'm the principal of Northumberland High School, and I'm also the president of the Virginia Association of School Principals.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Adrienne Bradley Gray. I am a third grade teacher at Booker T. Washington Elementary School in Suffolk, Virginia.
Good morning, Peggy Schimler. I'm the director of the education department at Randolph College. I represent higher ed.
Good morning. I'm Sherry Wozniak. I'm a middle school band director in Isle of Wight County Schools, as well as an arts integration specialist.
Hello, I'm Eric Maffa. I'm an assistant professor at Washington and Lee University and represent private higher ed.
Hi, Nicole Hutchison. I'm the director of transfer for the Virginia Community College System.
Hi, I'm Mary McIntyre. I am a 6-H reading specialist and drama teacher at Journey Middle School in Albemarle County.
Greetings and salutations. I'm Dr. Jessica Jones, agricultural education teacher and FFA advisor at Tunstall High School in Pittsylvania County. I'm representing Region 6 Career and Technical Education.
Good morning. I'm Annette Fornadel. I'm a kindergarten teacher at Harrisonburg City Public Schools, and I represent an elementary teacher.
Good morning. My name is Andy Cox. I'm the director of teacher ed at the University of Virginia's College at Wise, and I represent higher education publics.
Good morning. My name is Maggie Clemens. I'm the director of licensure and school leadership at the department.
Good morning. Meg Homer, educator engagement specialist with the Department of Teacher Education and Licensure.
Hi, good morning. I'm Shelby Elliott. I represent Human Resources, Administrative Admin Coordinator for Certification.
Good morning. My name is Jonelle Torbert, and I'm the Director of Teacher Education at the Virginia Department of Education.
And not with us today, but maybe on actually watching on the YouTube channel is our Board of Education Liaison Secretary, Ann Holton. We also have various ex officiary members with us. I don't see a representative from Chev, and I know our community college representative is not with us today as well. Madam Chair, we have a quorum. I think our guests have introduced themselves as well. Check.
I believe we need to do the naming of the chair and the vice chair and all of that stuff.
I was going to do, keep going down there.
Oh, okay. Is it down there? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Oh, go ahead.
As part of your packet that you received via email, you'll note that there was an agenda draft. We'll need a motion to approve the agenda and then someone to second. And if you could say your name, please.
Carrie Swore.
Second. Are there any corrections to the agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
The agenda stands approved. You've received also a copy of the last meeting held on April 18th, 22. We also need now a motion to approve the minutes or any corrections or changes. Second, please. Thank you. The minutes stand approved. I have no written public comments, and it doesn't appear that we have any guests that are here for public comment, but I will pause. I think I'll keep going. I would like to highlight, again, we're going to be using PowerPoints throughout the process. That way, at least we have a little bit of a visual as well for our viewers online. So as you can see, a high level on the screen of our business components today. I will begin by going through a little bit of procedure as well as some of the statutory expectations of ABTEL. And then we'll have our election for chair. And then the chair will take over the balance of the meeting for today. Again, today, we want to thank you for being part of our ABTEL, or the Advisory Board on Teacher Education and Licensure. It is a codified board to support the Board of Education. As such, ABTEL does not have the authority to make final policy decisions. However, it does make recommendations to the Board of Education. These recommendations are extremely important to the board because you represent many regional areas and stakeholders across the Commonwealth. So we hope that you will take your role very seriously. Today, you'll be voting on 6 items that will then go to the board for review and eventually final approval. As part of the advisory board, your participation represents not only you or yourself, but also the group for which you were selected. For example, if you're a classroom teacher, your vote represents classroom teachers in the Commonwealth. And we view each of your role as an advocate and a liaison with your various organizations and region among your colleagues and communities for whom you represent. And so if you are not here, that also leaves a gap and your voice is absent from those votes as well. In your role, we hope that you can gather input from those groups that you serve and serve as a liaison with relevant constituents and provide feedback to ABTEL from those communities. And again, we want to thank you for your presence today and your commitment. Each month, our agenda will change, driven by items from either the Board of Education directly requesting your opinion, staff support and recommendations on changes or modifications, or driven from this board itself's interests or desires. And again, we appreciate your commitment to the board and all the work that you do. And just as a reminder, we have 2 vacant positions. So we have over 20 or so members with various staff and ex officiary members. We have still a member at large in the classroom secondary special ed teacher, as well as 1 legislative rep also. And just as a reminder, if I can flip over. Projecting on the screen, but it's not projecting. Okay, it's delayed. Just as a reminder, let's see what's happening. All of our meetings and the meeting minutes are posted on the advisory board's webpage. So you will always have access to the meeting minutes, past minutes, as well as the agenda. And so here we also will highlight the public list of our members. And again, if there's any information that needs to be changed or modified, please communicate with myself or my assistant, Alice Bryant. To my knowledge, everyone has agreed that this is appropriate for public dissemination. You also see on the website a reminder of the codification in the Code of Virginia, which provides a description of those members, representation, as well as the designation of our office, the Department of Teacher Ed and Licensure, as a liaison and support for the advisory board. Okay, got a little delay there. All right, and so at this time, again, as we reference our members, we have the opportunity to elect a new chair and vice chair for this upcoming year. We want to thank and acknowledge Dr. Nancy Bradley, who has served in the capacity of chair for the last year. At this time, we'll take nominations for chair, and once we complete that process, then she will lead the remainder of the meeting and selection of the vice chair and subcommittee leads. Are there nominations for the position of chair? Any other nominations? I'll need a motion to close the nominations and prepare. And now the vote. Maggie, are you going to help with the vote?
Yes.
I abstain.
So we have a chair. Thank you so much, Nancy, for accepting the leadership for another year. Would you like to?
I can take it from here if you want. Okay,
Yes,
so
yes.
the next position that we need to fill is vice chair, who would fill in for the chair should they not be there. And that has been Andrew Dare, but do we know if he's still interested in that? Joan, do you have any idea, or should we?
Nope, continue on with nominations.
Okay. Do we have any nominations? You can also self-nominate to serve as vice chair for the advisory board. I would like to nominate Andy Cox if he would be willing to serve. Look at him looking at me. I'm sorry. Oh. Okay, so do we have a motion to name Andy Cox as vice chair of ABTEL? Congratulations, Andy. Okay, we also need to name chairs of our subcommittees. We have the Teacher Education and Licensure Subcommittee. Do we have a nomination to serve as chair for that committee?
And in the role previously was Eric Malfa.
Do we have a nomination? I nominate Eric Moffa to serve as the chair of the Teacher Education and Licensure Committee. Do we have a second?
So who nominated?
I nominated him.
Oh,
I have too much power right now. That's what it, so we need then a motion to approve him as Peggy Schimler. So do we have a motion to approve Eric as chair of that committee? You need a second? Okay, so congratulations to Eric. He is now our the chair of that committee. And then we also need to do, I'm trying to remember the name of the committee, Jen. I know that the Teacher Preparation Committee. Peggy Schimler has served in that role. Do we have a nomination for chair of the Teacher Education Committee? All right, we have a nomination for Peggy.
You can decline now, so right, we know we can decline.
Okay, so do we now have a motion to name Peggy Schimler chair of that committee? We need a second. Okay, congratulations, Peggy. All right. We will now move into the next piece of our business. We have several presentations, including critical shortage teaching area designations, Virginia Department of Education Strategic Plan for Recruitment, and then Virginia transfer for the Virginia Community College Educator Pathway Expansion. So we will turn things over to Janelle Torbert.
I will get the PowerPoint up just a second.
Good morning, everyone. This morning, I will be sharing on the critical shortage areas that we have in Virginia. Regulations governing the determination of critical shortage areas provide the responsibility of the Virginia Department of Education to administer and report on critical teaching shortage areas in Virginia to local school divisions, approved teacher preparation programs, and other state agencies, and the public. In response to this requirement, data were contained from the supply and demand survey for school personnel and the instructional personnel data collection sent by the VDOE, each of the Virginia School Division superintendents in October of 2021, to determine the qualifications for teachers and administrators. Information requested on this survey was based on school data reports October 1, 2021. These data were collected to determine the 2022-2023 critical shortage area endorsements for Virginia. The critical shortage areas are reported annually to the General Assembly. The supply and demand survey for school personnel and instructional personnel data, critical shortage areas. This is the data that was used to determine the 2022-2023 critical shortage teaching area. This is the last year that we will be using the supply and demand survey for school personnel and the instructional personnel data collection survey. Moving forward, the positions and exits collection will be used to determine the critical shortage areas. In addition to that, the Department of Education reports the critical shortage areas to the U.S. Department of Education. The proposals for designation by the U.S. Department of Education will be submitted in 2022 due to the U.S. DOE by 2023 or April 2023. The U.S. Department of Education explains the importance of these data as follows. The reporting of the teacher shortage area continues to be extremely important in alerting the nation where states and school districts are looking to potentially hire academic administrators, licensed teachers, and other educators and school faculty in specific disciplines and subject areas, grade levels, and/or geographic areas. The methodology for identifying our critical shortage areas. The methodology for identifying the critical shortage areas is the ranking is based on an aggregation of the following: total number of teaching positions that are unfilled, and the teaching positions that are filled by teachers who are licensed, but who are teaching in academic subject areas other than the areas of preparation. Establishing the critical shortage areas. So let's provide a little clarification on how this is done. I don't know if you're aware, the governor's directive, he had a governor's directive addressing the teachers shortage area. The critical shortage areas allows positions to be considered for the critical shortage areas. So we are in line with the governor's initiative to support the critical shortage areas. Shortage areas by subject areas will be designated from the top 10 academic disciplines identified as having shortages through the superintendent's annual survey of school divisions. In addition to the top 10 academic identified statewide school divisions, school divisions may designate a subject area as having a shortage area if the school division receives 3 or fewer qualified candidates, licensed or eligible for a license for any teaching vacancy for the subject area. Any Virginia school division, including rural or urban school divisions where 10% of the teachers are not fully licensed for their teaching assignment, may be designated as a geographic critical shortage area. A total of 101,924,000 full-time equivalent teachers as of October 1st, 2021 were reported for the 2020-2021 in the Instructional Personnel and Licensure Annual Data Collection for School Divisions. Rankings were totaled and the resulting sum ranked to determine the critical shortage area. And the critical shortage areas are as listed: elementary, pre-K 6, special education, middle education, grades 6 to 8, career and technical education, mathematics, grades 6 to 12, including algebra, science secondary, foreign language, pre-K to 12, English secondary, history and social science secondary, health and physical education. Just a note, the shortage areas typically in the last 10 years has been the same shortage areas. They just kind of move around. In addition to, and within the last 2 years, we've had school counseling, library media, and health and PE and reading specialists that just kind of jump in and out. And they might be number 8 and number 10. So we kind of fluctuate with the numbers as far as the top 10 that shortage teaching areas. That's it. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Janelle. It's always interesting to see how, especially those bottom 5, how it seems like the top 5 stay the same, but then we get different things coming in and out of the bottom 5. We will now invite Meg Homer to provide for us a Virginia Department of Education strategic plan for recruitment and retention.
Good morning. So as many of you know, I'm Meg Homer, Educator Engagement Specialist with the Department of Teacher Education and Licensure. One of the tasks that I was charged with when I was hired was to develop a statewide strategic plan to address educator recruitment and retention. So today, I'd like to provide some updates on where we are as well as some next steps. Thank you, Joan. Great. So naturally, this is a big undertaking and requires input from a diverse group of stakeholders. So we began in December of 2021 to form a recruitment and retention advisory committee. Next slide, please. With our first meeting taking place in January of 2022. So working with an agency called Urban Schools Human Capital Academy, the Recruitment and Retention Advisory Committee was formed with representatives from, next slide, please, key stakeholders across all 8 superintendents regions, including human capital professionals, teachers, principals, VDOE stakeholders and employees, higher education partners, parents, as well as students. Over the course of several months, Teacher Education and Licensure collaborated with members of the committee to draft and revise several versions of a strategic plan, a 3-year strategic plan for recruitment and retention. Next slide, please. So the document itself includes an introduction, which is essentially a literature review and landscape analysis, providing an overview of the teacher shortages or the teacher shortage, should say, across the United States as well as across Virginia. The proposed strategic plan itself includes 3 goals 2 strategies, and 8 action items with a variety of milestones that are also nested underneath those 8 action items. Next slide, please. So in terms of our goals, we have goal 1, reduce barriers for qualified individuals to enter the profession. Goal 2, increase the number of candidates eligible to fill public school divisions' hard to staff positions. Goal 3, strengthen strategies to recruit and retain a diverse, highly qualified educator workforce. And thus far, as we begin to share this with our stakeholders across the state, we've gotten good feedback, generally very positive feedback. It's very much in alignment with what we're seeing across divisions in terms of their own strategic plans. Next slide, please. In terms of strategies, we have 2 main strategies. The first being implement policies and practices to make careers in education more attractive and attainable. Strategy 2 is to implement programs and practices to recruit, support, and retain highly qualified educators with an emphasis on critical shortage areas. So in the strategic plan document, we provided a very lengthy chart that lists each of those action items, as well as milestones, and how each action item relates to a goal, strategy, and the level of involvement needed from stakeholders. So next slide, please. Here, I've just zoomed in on one rather than share 16 pages with you today. So here we're looking at action item 1, and you can see that's regarding a marketing campaign. We've been working for months with a marketing firm to develop a multifaceted marketing campaign, the cornerstone of which is a microsite. Next slide, please. This site will feature really beautifully designed animations, very powerful messaging, and an interactive feature. Next slide, please. To help the targeted populations really get inspired and start figuring out how to start that journey into teaching. Targeted ads will drive people to the microsite, and they in turn will be driven back to relevant DOE pages on licensure, career switcher programs, et cetera. So resources such as static ads and a print poster will also be made available to divisions to use locally to help drive people to this microsite. So that's just action item 1 that I wanted to share with you as sort of an example. Now, as I mentioned, the strategic plan document itself is pretty massive. So we've developed a graphic, next slide, please, that might be helpful in sort of conceptualizing the work we're doing. So you can see that the action items are anchored by the 3 goals in the center, and that the rings represent those strategies I mentioned earlier. In almost all cases, the action items employ both strategies, which is kind of why they're positioned in the center or kind of cover both rings. I'm hopeful that tools like this will be helpful in communicating the strategic plan and really engaging our stakeholders across Virginia. Related to engaging our stakeholders, I should mention that all the information related to the strategic plan, we do plan to have a place for that to live. And here we've got the URL. So that's hopefully where we will have everything living, where it's designed more for a general audience, what the strategic plan is about, how we arrived at the goals and strategies. It will have the graphic, it'll have an opportunity to actually download the full strategic plan, but it really is designed more for a general audience. And we don't have to go there right now, Joan, we can always, if we have time towards the end, I'm happy to pull it up and we can look at it together. But just so you know, that's coming down the pike as well. No worries. Thank you. So now I'm hoping you'll indulge me a little bit because I'd like to take a bit of a detour. I think it's worth noting that although that this strategic plan indicates a very concerted effort to organize our initiatives and communicate a clear vision for how we're going to address the educator shortage, we know full well that we have been working diligently with each other collaboratively to tackle this issue for a long time. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention what's already underway. So next slide, please. Personally, I find it helpful to organize the work into 4 categories: grants, programs, policies, and resources, which is why I created a document, next slide, please, that I'll call current initiatives. It can be helpful, I think, in summarizing what's already underway. It's not meant for distribution. This is just front and back of a handout I created. But I think it's helpful in summarizing the work and showing how our newly articulated goals and strategies really do apply to what we've already been doing. So one of those categories that may be of keen interest, I think, is the grant and funding category. Next slide, please. So I'm just zooming in again on the grant category, which is why we created a list. Next slide, please. That specifically focuses on the numerous grant and funding opportunities already in progress. This first page offers an overview and tells us that if we focus just on this past fiscal year 2022, we've served hundreds of school divisions, well over 1,000 individuals having been reached, with more numbers being reported. And you can see I underlined a couple poignant examples. So having covered paid internship scholarships for 41 teacher candidates and counting, that continues. Having awarded recruitment incentive for public education, what you might know as RIPE grants, to 43 school divisions. And actually, I think it's more at this point because these may be slightly outdated figures. And we actually have a list where we've summarized all of those grants. Next slide, please. And those funding programs, including the divisions, the universities that we individuals served. So we are trying to track all of this, and I just wanted to share that with you. So I appreciate your taking that little detour with me, because I do think it's important to acknowledge the work that we're already doing, what's already being done, and that the strategic plan really is just a way to unify and organize everything into a package. Next slide, please. Much of what is already being done alongside some new initiatives. And this is why in many instances, the strategic plan references those current initiatives that are already underway, suggesting that they be continued or expanded. Now, as we return our focus back to the strategic plan, thank you, and think about moving forward, you should know that we're working on a variety of new initiatives, including evaluating mentorship programs for new teachers, exploring revisions to data collections to better or get a better sense of why teachers may be leaving the profession, and developing a registered apprenticeship program. With regards to the strategic plan itself, we do need to move into the phase of establishing a timeline in terms of next steps, with targeted deadlines and identifying the responsible parties, and forming a subcommittee on the Recruitment and Retention Advisory Committee, members of which will be charged with leading that effort to evaluate the strategic plan. And of course, I will be looking to you all for help in communicating this plan and communicating with our stakeholders what our goals and action items actually are. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has them.
I wanted to follow up on some of the barriers that we have in higher education for students in entering the teaching profession are the tests. And it's not even so much that they can't pass the test. If they don't pass it once, it's a huge cost barrier. And so it is something that actually we're held more toward than if you're hired provisionally and you get good evaluations, you can be exempt from the test as long as you've attempted them. Is there any talk of how to help those of us that are actually leading teacher education programs to address the testing issues that we have?
I don't think we've talked about that specifically. What we do have in the strategic plan right now are efforts to explore how to better support students in terms of expanding some of those grant opportunities for assessment fees. But if you're talking about changing, oh, sure.
I would say that ABTEL and the Licensure Committee is, I guess, one of the strategies that we're using to get some feedback and potentially propose some options. So ABTEL and the Licensure Committee will be bringing forth some things, but just keeping in mind all of that in the climate of everything else.
Right. We just want to prepare as many as we can. And we hate to see really good, some of the people leave our programs as non-completers because they can't pass the licensure testing. They get hired provisionally and don't have to take the licensure testing and get their license. And so it's kind of a weird backdoor out of our programs. And we know that teachers that go through approved programs stay in teaching longer and do better. And so that's where we were hoping to get an update.
Sure.
So,
thank you. Well, I look forward to hearing what the subcommittee has to say. Thank you, Dr. Johnson.
any other questions or comments?
I think behind you, Nancy.
Oh.
All right, just a few things. One is, I don't know if you're tackling salaries because there are some state national data that showed Virginia's teacher salaries are pretty low compared to other states. So that seems like a big one. The other is just the nature of the role. So I see some innovative pockets, including up in DC, really rethinking the teacher role. So I think that's the other issue if people think it's not a doable job. So I wonder if there's some innovation, people in the state, looking at that, the role. And then for grants, I see a lot of ESSER money, so I know that's going to go away. So I don't know what, what you're thinking after that. But I like that you're using some of it for this purpose. I think that's great. And then I don't know if you have any strategies around using subs as a way to prepare. So I see some work in that space around the country. And then the other one's just a pet one of mine. Like there's a lot of AmeriCorps programs that are in the education space, and I think they're great pre-teacher pathways, and Virginia has a lot of them. And I wonder about making some connections from Virginia AmeriCorps into the teacher profession, finding folks that way too.
Thank you. I will say the apprenticeship program, we'll elaborate on more in the future meetings, but the apprenticeship pathway really focuses on many of the recommendations that you just shared, providing individuals in non-teacher roles, but having an opportunity to be in the school, having a strong mentor relationship, and having competency-based accomplishments as they prepare to meet the licensure requirements. And so that will be a great grow your own model, as well as to bring interested folks in, and not in the lead role of a teacher, but to prepare them to be subs or any of the various other roles. So I think you'll hear more about that with the apprenticeship model. Andy Cox, share something you want to say?
Yeah.
Does the BDOE collect any information from teachers who leave the classroom? Any kind of survey data or anything that's statewide?
Yep. And that's funny. We just had a conversation very recently about the positions and exits collection that includes asking individuals why they're leaving their current role. And we actually are, and part of the strategic plan is to explore how to improve those data collection processes. And one item is a suggestion of adding or revising those questions to really kind of drill down a bit further, to not just get at the question of like, oh, I'm retiring, or I found another job, but maybe to follow up and get a little more information. But that's underway. And so we're excited to see that data.
So they had some preliminary data shared, but it is the first time that the state has collected exit data. And so we'll be sharing that in the coming months for this group as well. Let's share his mic, please.
Thank you. As you looked at putting together the, the recruitment program plan, have you looked at diversity as well?
Yes.
Have you looked at some HBCUs, and is that a part of the plan?
Yeah. And I apologize. I probably should have had a slide that just outlined the action items. So one of those action items is to try to align practices with what was recommended on the task force for diversifying the teacher pipeline. I'm going to mess up the name of it. So the apprenticeship program, for example, is one milestone that relates to that, because we are trying to be more intentional about getting future educators of color into the classroom. So that's just one example. Each action item, we started out with like 32 action items. So we had to really be very intentional and focus on getting them down to 8. And then each action item might have as many as like 8 milestones underneath it that are more specific. So to your question earlier, as we think about how exactly we're going to enact these action items, that's where things get a little more specific. And that's where the next phase, I think, comes into play in terms of identifying who our stakeholders are, who our responsible parties are, and what this actually will look like in terms of taking shape. Right now, the action stones are necessarily a bit broad to try to capture a lot of the work out there. And so we look forward to the next phase and really refining what's going to be done.
So off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of some specifics. I know there is an action item that relates to metrics that were identified by the task force in 2018. Yes. So there are percentages for increasing diversity, at least 2 to 3 points. I remember benchmarks. And then there is a HBCU residency grant that was given for the first time last year with Virginia State in collaboration with Virginia Union. And I know VSU is also attempting to apply for some additional residency funding. So those are just two things that are very specific in terms of increasing diversity by percentages. And then I know at least that HBCU residency grant. Off the top of my head.
And I do have it on my laptop if anybody wants to see that. Yeah.
And so I think we will hear more from you, Meg, also as we continue to launch some of the initiatives and asking for more feedback from this group as well.
Any other questions or comments? I did like seeing that there was a strategic, like they were moving towards figuring out some pathways to address the shortage.
Yes.
So
We're-
thank you for
we're
the work
moving.
that you've done on that.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Virginia Transfer, Virginia's Community College Educator Pathway Expansion, Dr. Hutchinson, if you'd like to come address. Thank you.
As she comes, and I need to pull up her presentation, as she comes, I will say that we're going to also have starting a series of various initiatives, best practices, things that we want to shout out and acknowledge that we are doing around the state, around the areas of addressing the shortage. Many of us are doing great work, and so we want to highlight those here and be aware specifically that I think you're going to mention the alignment with Chev in your office as well. So I wanted to kind of show some of those collaborations that we know are also happening, and I will pull up your presentation.
So again, I'm Nicole Hutchison. I'm the Director of Transfer with the Virginia Community College System. And I also work closely with Chev in this capacity. So I'll be talking about some work that we've done on the community college side that wasn't initially done exclusively to address the teacher shortage, but that certainly indirectly and ultimately directly will hopefully be able to help with that.
While she's pulling up the presentation, I did get a note from Hilton. If you guys could use the mics, she can't hear all the questions. She can hear the responses up against the mic on the podium. If you guys can make sure to grab one of the and ask your questions, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. I think I've adequately introduced myself. Thank you. I apologize for how text heavy this slide is. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on Transfer Virginia. Again, I'm the Director of Transfer and Transfer Virginia with the community college system and with the state. Transfer Virginia was, we often say, legislatively ignited in 2018 by legislation that addressed the challenges of transfer for students, the challenges of courses transferring, of degrees transferring, like when a student would complete an associate degree and then transfer to the four-year school, they frequently would lose a lot of credits, which increased how long it took them to get their degree, but obviously also increased how much that degree cost them. So we have been focusing for the past 4 years on improving the efficiency of that whole transfer process for community college students. As you probably know, community college students are much more likely to be first-generation college students and underrepresented minorities than are students who start at the four-year school. The legislation required that the public four-year colleges in Virginia participate. It was optional for the private four-year colleges, but we've had incredibly good participation on the part of the private four-year schools as well. So the goals of Transfer Virginia, you can see up here, are to engage the key stakeholders in improving communication and facilitating collaboration. So that's how we have worked to make courses and degrees transfer better for students. We've been engaging faculty across the two-year and four-year institutions to align the academic expectations, to align course objectives between the two-year schools and the four-year schools. We're developing transfer guides, and education was one of the first disciplines for which we developed a transfer guide. So I'll be able to share a little bit of information about that with you today. But the transfer guides show students what they take. So for example, if a student wants to major in education, The transfer guide shows them very clearly what courses they should take in their first 2 years, that time at the community college, how those courses will transfer to the four-year school, and what courses will remain at the four-year school once they are there. So we're setting it out so that students, if they're attending full-time, can very easily, consistently, and knowledgeably do a 2+2 pathway, 2 years at the community college, followed by 2 years at the four-year school. And we have an extensive transfer portal called Portal Virginia. We're not going to explore it today, but it's transfervirginia.org. And it allows students to look at every course that they're taking, every college throughout the state, and see what courses are available, how courses transfer, and how different degrees, like an Associate of Science in Education, would transfer to the four-year schools as an associate, as a Bachelor of Arts in Education, or Bachelor of Education, rather. Next slide, please. Text-heavy slide, and now we're spending even more time on it than I intended. No, not on you. It's the complexity of having me up here and you over there. While we're pulling up that slide, I'll say that this has been some of the most rewarding work that I've done while in the position of Director of Transfer, and it was some of the first work that I tackled when I came in. My predecessor, Patricia Parker, had worked very closely with the education faculty, the education disciplines at the 2-year and 4-year schools. And I'm sure you won't be surprised to know that those education faculty at both the 2-year schools and the 4-year schools are really engaged in finding ways to attract students to the profession and keep them in those degree programs and help them graduate fully prepared to become teachers. It looks like we're back there. That is my slide. So these slides, and from where you're sitting, I'm not sure if the font in there is large enough, but these two images represent the main components under that Transfer Virginia umbrella. On your left side, this is just how we design those transfer guides that I mentioned that show how what courses students will take in their first 2 years and what will transfer. And those are terms that you might be aware of, but I do want to emphasize there that we want students to complete their associate degree in education when we're creating these transfer guides. The transfer guides are really focused on completing an associate degree and then transferring to the 4-year school. That's where we started. That's what we were really focused on. But you'll see as I continue to talk that some of the elements that we worked on in creating those transfer guides are actually relevant in ways that weren't planned or expected in providing opportunities for students to take education courses. On the right side, you can see some gears that show how these different elements that I'm talking about work together. So Joan, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So we have, with those gears, we have what's called a common curriculum in yellow. The common curriculum is a common education curriculum that all of the community colleges, we have 23 community colleges in the state, and many of them offer education programs. Most of them at least offer some education classes. And we've worked on creating a common curriculum so that the courses that are offered at the different community colleges are the same. They have the same course objectives, so that the 4-year schools feel really comfortable and confident about transferring those courses to the 4-year schools because they can see very clearly what's in those courses, and they know that at each community college, the same material is taught. Once we've created that common curriculum in education, which we did last year, we can work on what's called transfer guides, which I mentioned. And once we have those transfer guides in place, we have guaranteed program admission agreement opportunities for students. So thank you so much. There we go. So we can probably click through those first 3 graphics there. This is just the process that I mentioned with the common curriculum, becoming transfer guides, becoming guaranteed admission agreements. And again, I'm presenting this all to you. These are all designed for traditional community college students or traditional college students who have chosen to take the 2 years at the community college to 2 years at the 4-year school pathway. But in designing it, we recognize that most of our students in the community college don't fit that that pattern so much. They're not generally students. We do have some, but they're not usually students who came into the community college intending to do 2 years, get their associate degree, transfer, and then do 2 more years. So these transfer guides in this process certainly capture those students and cater to those students, but also there are a number of other students and types of students who can benefit from the work that we've been doing. Next slide, please. So when it comes specifically to education courses and the common curriculum, we've been working on this common curriculum in many, many disciplines, but focusing here on the education courses and the common curriculum, we have so far developed and revised courses in collaboration with the 2- and 4-year school, and I'll show you a list of those courses in a minute. We've developed the common curriculum throughout the Virginia Community College system for education. So we know that the same types of courses or the same course content is taught at all of the community colleges. We also have a curriculum that gives students a pathway to an associate degree in education or an associate of science with a focus in education at any of the community colleges that have education programs. And we have those 2+2 for students who are going full-time pathways right now in elementary education, special education, secondary education, and then some of the teaching specializations, as well as middle and secondary education. Next slide, please. So these are the courses that we worked on. Again, this is collaboration between the 2-year faculty and the 4-year faculty throughout the state. So we have 7 courses that we have created common course objectives for, topics that will be covered in those courses. And you have the names here of those courses. And while I know the names of courses differ a little bit from institution to institution, you can probably get a sense of what the course is by seeing the name here. Once we have created these courses system-wide throughout the Virginia Community College system, we share the courses with the learning objectives and the topics covered with all of the 4 years, both the public and private 4 years in the state. And they determine the transfer equivalency for those courses. And when they look at those courses, they can gather a lot of information about how those courses are taught and what's taught in the courses. With these 7 courses here, at last check last week, between 15 and 20 schools throughout Virginia, 4-year schools, public and private, had created a direct transfer equivalency so that these courses were equivalent to their courses like this at the 4-year school in education. Of course, not every 4-year college in the state has an education program, so not all 4-year colleges have done that equivalency. And there are a few schools that are lagging in submitting their equivalencies to me. But right now we have a critical number of, or critical mass of 4-year colleges that have already created that equivalency, which again means that if students take that course at the community college, it is guaranteed not just to transfer to the 4-year school, but to transfer to the 4-year school as that course, whatever their equivalent to that course. So it's not transferring as an elective, which was a challenge that many of our students faced before. They would take courses with us at the community college. The course would transfer, they'd get 3 credits transferred, but it wouldn't apply towards an education degree. Next slide, please. And so I've alluded to this while I've been talking, but when we think about who's taking the education courses at the community college, I was thinking about the different groups. And as I mentioned, we started off the conversation. We often start off the conversation by just thinking about the more traditional high school student, a student who's recently graduated from high school. They decide for financial or other reasons to attend the community college for their first 2 years. They receive their associate degree after going full-time for 2 years. They transfer to the 4-year school and receive their bachelor's degree. So that is one type of student we get at the community college, but by no means the majority of students fall into that category. Next, please. We also have students who come and have taken a non-traditional path to the community college. So they didn't just graduate from high school. Maybe they went somewhere after high school and weren't successful in college the first time. Maybe they went directly into the workforce and then decided that they wanted to return to college and went the community college route. Sometimes they're part-time, sometimes they're full-time, but they generally receive their associate degree and then transfer and get their bachelor's degree. Next, please. We also have students who are coming to the community college just to take some courses, often prerequisites, before they transfer to the four-year school. Next, please. We have students who are exploring the field of education. So they're thinking about whether this is something of interest, and they go to the local community college and they take a course at the community college or a few courses at the community college to see if education is for them. Next, please. And then we have the group that when we started planning these transfer guides and the common curriculum, we hadn't been thinking that much about these groups, but I think that this group of students is really central in thinking about our courses and what we can do at the community colleges to help address the teacher shortage right now. And those are people who have a bachelor's degree in some other field, and they're coming back, they're intending to go into teaching, and they're, and they're taking some courses towards licensure at the community college. And again, because all of those courses that I showed you, those 7 courses, do transfer to the four-year schools, prospective teachers or people teaching seeking licensure can take those courses at the community college and know that they transfer to the four-year school.
Any questions or comments?
Oh, yeah. Do you have a microphone over there?
Thank you for the presentation. I did notice under teaching specializations, was that like, can you go a little bit more?
That's theater, music, and language and world languages.
Okay. Is there any work being done towards career and technical education? We're our own little entity, but nonetheless.
That is not something that I had heard discussed. I've been in this role since the spring. And so much of the work on the education pathways had already been done. I believe in engineering, there was some conversation, but that's something that I would definitely be interested in talking more about.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, Jennifer came to visit us at Virginia Tech in the spring for a CTE day. Any other comments? I will say that I really think that this is timely. We've been working some with you on this, and with us going to undergraduate degrees, it just really makes a lot of sense. So.
Yeah, I think this looks amazing, and it's great equity work for the state. But I was going to build off of the career and technology education work in K-12, because I know there's early childhood education and dual enrollment. So I was just curious how you're making the connection. So I know at least for early childhood, folks are coming out of K-12 with associate's degrees. So I don't know how you're connecting there with those folks. And then just getting the word out about the articulation that you have here with, are you working with school counselors in K-12, and how are you letting students know and families know about these pipelines? And for sure, we want to be encouraging for Meg's work, encouraging folks. And then your last point there, the bachelor's plus, I think that could be really a big, way bigger, and market that if you already have your bachelor's, you can go to a community college, and hopefully that's what you were saying, that you become a teacher that way and affordably. And then lastly, I know with the G3 tuition, free tuition, it includes early childhood education, right? But not teachers, so not education. So that seems like a one to add there. Free tuition in the G3 program, right?
So you brought up a number of really important things. And yes, so the early childhood is part of the G3 program, which is the free community college opportunities for students. And frustratingly, we have not been able, although the conversation, I know it gets brought up regularly, so I do hope that there's some movement to include teacher education more broadly. The G3 program on the community college side was all Associate of Applied Science programs. And so those are programs that traditionally are designed not to be transfer degrees. Early childhood, even though it is an Associate of Applied Science degree, a number of the four-year schools do have a pathway to it. I know VCU has one, for example. That was my previous institution. So there's kind of been a workaround designed, but it would be great if we were able to look at it not as a workaround. And I know some of the four-year schools have built transfer guides in early childhood from just our general education rather than from the early childhood, but that doesn't have the free tuition part. Another thing that you mentioned was the getting the word out. And so we've been working with Brittany Everett at VDOE, and she's been fantastic in helping us talk to counselors. The portal, it had a soft launch in November, but it had its big refresh and its big launch just about a month ago. And so we're working hard to get the word out. And our portal coordinator, her name is Melody Crenshaw, and I have been kind of on the circuit, but any opportunities to talk to high school counselors who have a good connection with parents. If there are direct ways to talk to parents, we would certainly take that too, but we know the counselors are really our best audience with that. But yeah, we would be very interested in helping spread the word about the portal, because all of these, since education was one of the first 4 disciplines that we did, all of these transfer guides, and there are dozens of them in education, will be available on the portal in about 2 weeks. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for this work. It's really amazing.
Thank you so much for giving me the time to be here.
Something is happening with the computer, with connecting, so just keep moving.
Yeah.
Okay.
If any of you want to touch base about any of this or talk about any of this, my email is on the last slide that's not coming up, but it's M. Hutchison. There's no N in Hutchison. I mean, there's an N at the end of Hutchison, but no N in the middle of Hutchison. So it's mhutchison@vccs.edu. And any ideas that you have for how we can get the word out, how we can take advantage of those course equivalencies to offer those courses to students, not just those who are on the 2+2 pathway, would be very much appreciated.
Thank you so much. Our next agenda items are the 6 action items that we have for today. They're related to the passing scores for the praxis test. I'm going to turn these items over to Joan to introduce.
Maggie, can you pull up the presentations? And we try to log in again. And we'll have our guests also presenting. Malik, our ETS representative, also here from New Jersey as we work through our technical issues. So again, thank you so much. Today we have an opportunity, as Nancy has mentioned, to review 3 revised praxis content assessments and offer a recommendation for a benchmark passing score for those respective assessments. We're going to take each item one at a time, discuss it, and then determine a recommendation separately and vote on them separately. High level, as a reminder, many of you were able to participate in our kind of orientation to establishing benchmarks this summer, so appreciate you all being there. As a reminder, the board has prescribed 2 types of assessments for the support of licensure of educators in the state. There are professional assessments, for example, the VCLA, which is the Virginia Communication and Literacy Assessment, that is taken by all educators, regardless of subject matter or grade level, to demonstrate communication and literacy skills. And then we have praxis reading assessment for elementary special ed and reading specialists that are all considered professional assessments. And then there are the praxis content or subject area assessments. And as we know, these assessments for content area are used in a variety of ways. The IHEs, thank you. Yeah. All right, so again, the assessments are used in a variety of ways. And so we know our IHEs are required to have the students demonstrate their content, subject matter with passing and meeting the benchmark scores that the state establishes for them to complete their programs. Thus, the traditional route, the package of completing everything that's required for licensure in one program. Then we also have alternate routes, whereby applicants have their praxis assessment as part of a prerequisite to their program. For example, our state recognized career switcher programs that candidates are asked to complete those for admission into the program. And then we have other alternate routes which generally support the divisions with their employees. Once they're hired, they have 3 as a default years of a provisional license to complete all of the licensure requirements, whether that be courses as well as the assessments. And then for our traditional programs, individuals actually can test and have multiple endorsements when they leave the traditional programs. If they are finishing one program, for example, in elementary, they can take a test to also provide them capacity and marketability with another endorsement as well. So again, the assessments are used to demonstrate the subject matter knowledge for our traditional as well as alternate routes. And so again, I think our first item will be chemistry. And I think Malik, you want to introduce yourself also?
Certainly.
And we'll just pass it to you.
Again, my name is Malik McKinley, serve as a Director of Client Relations for the Praxis Program. I think we all met back in August. The first few slides, if we could, do you have the ability to move forward or can I do it? Okay. So the first few slides kind of touch on things that we've talked about previously. So I'm just going to move directly into the conversation around chemistry, physics, and biology. If we could just skip a couple slides. We skip like the first 4 or 5 slides until we get to chemistry. Just keep going. Yep, yep. I included this just so it can be in there for the record if you need the PowerPoint, but keep going.
Can you repeat, can you actually go through this process a little bit, the standard setting, just say that out? Are you gonna get to that?
Sir, I mean, you can pause right there if you want.
Are you gonna cover that?
No, well, we covered it in August, so I
just would do a little reminder.
Okay.
It's the first time some people have heard it.
Certainly. Okay. You could, if you could step back one. Okay, so a part of our standard setting process is to, after we actually design an exam, we pull together states from across the nation. This maybe 10, 15 years ago used to be a process we would do within each individual state, but many state departments of ed and agencies of education came to us and asked us to pull together multiple states as a part of the process in order for there to be more portability across the states. So when we pull together states, we ask them to spend about 3 days with us in Princeton. We give them training around what the standard setting process looks like. And then we ask them to kind of dive right into looking at each item on the exam. And really what we're asking them to do is talk about the appropriateness of those individual items, as well as giving ratings to those items. There's a process within assessment development that eventually develops a cut score based on that 3-day process. And then as a result, in the very end, you have a cut score associated with the multi-state study. We have a multi-state study for chemistry, for physics, and for biology. I've shared that with the department, but I can certainly send that again if you want to kind of take a deeper dive into the document. If we can move.
It's part of the email, part of their agenda. It's part of the agenda.
Okay.
So you have that if you want to pull that up.
So, but yes, ma'am. So a part of the adoption process real quickly is for a state to take, if it is a brand new exam or a brand new certification area for a state, then usually a state will want to look at the actual items on the test, talk about the appropriateness of those items, appropriateness of that test as it relates to the new certification field. In this case here, chemistry, physics, and biology have already been used. You already have certification areas you already have certification tracks for those particular areas. You're already using the current chemistry, biology, chemistry, physics, and biology exam. We have updated those based on next generation science standards. We've done a full sweep of all of our science exams, including those that are found in elementary education, as well as middle school and high school. We're moving forward with this secondary portion here. So that's what we're discussing today. But again, this is a regeneration or the next iteration of these 3 science exams. So with chemistry 5246, usually the number changes when we have a great or significant amount of material changing in the particular exam. So let's just take a quick look with chemistry. And this will be available to you as well. So let's just dive into chemistry. We can move forward here. One more slide. These are the overall changes, and I'm not going to read through everything that's on the slide, but these are the overall changes that you'll find on the chemistry exam. Again, as noted, all of our exams are updated with next gen science standards. You'll see in the bottom portion the percentage of exam based on the categories that are listed. You'll notice tasks of teaching and principles of science and engineering that are represented on this exam differently than previous exams. So again, you have access to this PowerPoint to kind of dive in deeper. And just as a side note for universities that are in the room, if you ever want targeted information specifically for your science faculty, you can certainly reach out to ETS and we can provide that in person or in a virtual format. As we move forward, this is the overall study companion test at a glance. As you can see here, you can see the length of time, the number of questions, the format that it's in. You can see the overarching categories, number of questions in each of those categories. This is information that's provided to faculty, but specifically for university students or for teacher candidates as they're preparing for the exam. Just wanted to give you a couple screenshots if we can move forward here. The content categories are broken down. You'll see overarching categories with subtopics bulleted, numbered, or lettered points as we move forward. In the study companion, there's also, as you can see, if we can move forward one, science and engineering practices, and keep going forward, tasks of teaching as well. As we move forward, there are sample questions that are associated here. We usually have maybe between 30 and 35 sample questions that students can use just to kind of, not to be the total sum of their study, but be some part of the foundation as they practice and study for the exam. And then we also have, as you move forward, rationales and associated answers and rationales that are associated with each question. So candidates can dive a little bit deeper. So as we move forward here with the technical report, and just one slide here, just wanted to show you the number of states that are using the chemistry exam thus far. These are the states that have officially adopted the test, and you can see the cut score. What we have noticed over the last 5 or 7 years is that most states are adopting the recommendation that comes from the study, because it's not a recommendation that comes from ETS, but it comes from the group of states that participate, which is a group of faculty, group of K through 12 teachers from various states across the nation. So states kind of trust that opinion that comes together. So in this case, as you can see, most states are adopting at 146. this is not a comprehensive list. This is a list of states that have officially made their adoption public. But if you look on our website, you'll notice most of the states that use our program are currently using our chemistry exam, similar to physics and biology. And they are going through the process similar to what Virginia is going through now, going through the process of looking at an exam, adopting the test, and moving it to the registration system. So overall, this study took place in May 2021. Just reading the quick highlights here, there were 15 states that participated, as well as Washington, D.C. There were 2 panelists from Virginia. I don't know those panelists' name, but they are in the technical report at the very end of the technical report if you want to find out specifically who participated. Overall, 25 panelists. You can see the breakdown here in terms of the type of participant. And the recommended passing score was 56 out of 100 raw score points. And our assessment development department, as I mentioned earlier, has translated that onto our 100 to 200 point scale, and the score point is a 146. I think most often, or at least most recently, Virginia has adopted praxis exams at the recommendation point, which would be here a 146. So I'll turn it back to.
Do we have
Maggie
any
and
questions for
Joan.
Malik about the score? We will need to have a recommended passing score. Do we have a recommendation?
I'll make a recommendation to. Oh, I'm sorry. Hi, Eric Maffa. I'll make a recommendation for the chemistry exam of a 146 passing score.
Do we have a second? Jessica Jones, second. So all those in favor of accepting a passing score of 146, say aye. Opposed? Thank you. That takes care of 1. We got 2 more.
Okay, so I have similar slides for both physics and biology, so we could probably move as quickly as you need to through that. So for physics, as you can see, that information is similar in terms of changes that have occurred. You certainly have access to this as well. As we move to the next slide, you'll see the overall information that's found at the test at a glance. As you can see, okay, we can just kind of, no problem. Content categories, again, task of teaching and information around science and engineering principles that are different than the last exam. As you move forward, discussion questions as well. Answers and rationales associated. All of that information, again, is in our study companion, which is free of charge for teacher candidates. And if we can move forward, one more and one more. Here's a list of users thus far. Again, states are moving forward with the adoption process. It could take a month, it could take 6 months, depending on whether there's a professional standards board, whether there is a board of education, whether it has to go through certain committees. So states are at different points in the process, but what you will see again is that all of the users of physics, which is over 30, will eventually move from the current test to this exam. As you note here, most states have adopted at the 145 point score point. And if we could move forward one more slide. This study took place in November of 2021. 11 states participated with 19 panelists. There were 2 panelists again from Virginia. So there was homegrown representation on this process or in this panel. 56 out of 100 raw score points equated for this particular exam a 145. 145. Again, there's multiple information or a whole host of information in the technical report that you have available to you if you want to dive in deeper on any information around this. So score point of 145 is the recommendation.
Okay, do we have any questions for Malik about the physics exam? Can we have a recommendation on a passing score? Anyone?
Travis Burns, I'm just curious, how different are the scores from what we currently have in effect?
Can you look it up? Okay. I will note, I don't know the older scores or the current scores offhand. Maggie will share that in just a second, but in terms of comparison, you can't really make a apples to apple comparison because they're two different tests and because the content has changed somewhat. So because the content has changed and the actual assessment review of that during the multi-state process has changed, you can't really look at a 150 that might have been on the current test and compare that to the 146 on a new test and say the other score is higher. But Maggie.
The physics test right now is, that's 5265, it's a 147.
So probably very comparable to a 145 on just by this shift of the exam and the way that questions are asked. It's probably not going to be a whole lot different than what students are trying to meet now.
Well, the content has been updated. Yeah, the content has changed at least by 25-30% or so. But
unpack that a little bit because we kind of quickly looked at the changes. I know that there's some mechanisms, so if you can just elaborate, I put that screen back up again.
Yep.
Just highlight, just give people an example of how it changed. You could give us an example of how the test has changed.
Yes, yeah. So in the changes section that you have in front of you, 1/2 or more of the test questions now integrate at least one of the science and engineering practices that are identified by NextGen. 1/4 to 1/3 of the test questions assess a candidate's physics content knowledge as applied to tasks of teaching, and that's significantly different than what you currently saw. Right, and a part of our program is, especially as you look at science, is including those tasks of teaching. We're trying to incorporate more of not just content, but also pedagogy into our exams. Yes, sir.
I was going to ask, with this being a new assessment, changed assessment, kind of score that you've identified here, what evaluation are you going to do afterwards to assess pass rates moving forward?
So we evaluate on a continuous basis looking at those pass rates, but keep in mind that the pass rate or the cut score that Virginia decides to adopt is your own. And if you call us in or you want data on that pass rate, we can certainly, or on this particular cut score, we can certainly provide that for you. But we look at it on an ongoing basis. I mean, separately, when you think about, the way that we assess each exam, after a group of candidates take a test, it comes back to ETS, and this might be 1,000 candidates, or it might be 5,000 candidates across the nation. We look at each individual item and we make sure that there's no bias present. We make sure that there aren't any groups that are affected negatively based on an individual question, because it would be concerning if we look at item number 50 on an exam and see that all white women are getting that question wrong, and then all Black men are getting the question right. There's something wrong with that question. So we do that type of analysis on an ongoing basis. But in terms of pass rates, we really wait for a state to come to us and say, hey, we want to have a data meeting, dive in deeper on a particular exam, content categories, et cetera, and then we can provide that information. But that's stuff that we do free of charge. So whenever Virginia Board of Ed, ABTEL, or any specific university wants that information, we can provide it.
Any other questions for Malik?
Malik, do you have any data that reflects on that? If we change by one standard deviation, the percent pass rate changes by whatever that may be?
I don't have that at my fingertips, but those are data that we have available to us in our system, and we could run those for the state of Virginia. And obviously if you adjusted the cut score by one standard error, obviously that pass rate would increase if you're adjusting it downward. And that would give you an opportunity for an additional amount of students or test takers to enter into the classroom. I'm assuming that's where you're going with that.
And to dovetail into Andy's comment, I noticed that Mississippi has constantly gone down to that 140, where I've seen 146 consistently. Can you just give us maybe a little bit of background? This is a conversation I think we've had about a year ago about what that looks like and maybe some of the benefits, but also the drawbacks to changing that one standard deviation.
Well, I mean, it really is a state-owned decision. We provide this recommendation that's based on a number of states that have come together to kind of talk through an exam, but it really is where a state is at any moment. And we can't say to Mississippi, or we can't say to Connecticut or any state around the nation that because the score point is 145, that's where you absolutely need to adopt a cut score. That is the recommendation. That is where most states are. But individual states at any point think about their pipeline issues. They think about the supply and demand issues. They think about how challenging certain academic material may be, and they make adjustments based on that information.
I know we've got new folks, so maybe a little background on where we have gone.
Andy Cox has asked that we made some recommendations last year on tests where we actually recommended this one standard deviation below, and then it was not approved by the Board of Education. They went with this recommended standard deviation. So
I will chime in also. I think history will share that they have been consistent with our recommendations of ABTEL. In the last year was really probably for me being in the state the first time that they did not agree with the recommendation. And the deliberations focused on high quality and ensuring that the state, were not reducing our standards of quality. And they actually looked at the recommendations and scores from other states that were close to us. And again, wanted to emphasize maintaining the quality, and that reducing the test benchmark may be one approach, and they recognize the concerns for the pathway and the impact of those passing, but they felt that there would be other more appropriate ways to address the concerns of the pathway versus reducing the cut scores. And as a reminder, in my updates, I was also going to say, and probably Ann Houghton's on and wish she could talk as well. We do have 5 new members on the board now. And so many of them will be hearing this for the first time also.
You have a question behind you.
Hi, I would like to request, if it's okay with the rest of the board, that in the future, in any other presentations where we're receiving information about praxis pass rates, that we have that information included, whether we change our recommended score by one standard deviation, what that would affect, how much that would affect the pass rate, because I feel like that's information that would help us inform our decision. And without it, we're kind of making it without the complete picture. So I know we can't have it for today for these particular subjects, but in the future, we're going to be considering more and more of these praxis pass scores. And so I would just like to have that always included in the presentation to help us make our decision. I don't know if we have to vote on that or what.
No, that's fine. Yeah. So there are sometimes just FYI here, there are sometimes a test is brand new. Like if we released it in the fall of 2022, there wouldn't be much data for you to gather in the last month. But this particular exam, well, all of these exams are new. But if you happen to be looking at this next year, let's say, this is 2023 and we were looking at physics, you'd have a year's worth of data in the system. There might not be many Virginia candidates data in the system, but you could at least look nationally at the cut score, the recommendation, and then look at score points above and below to figure out exactly where you feel comfortable. So we can certainly provide that.
And Malik, that's where I was going with my question. If we are going to adopt a cut score now and we review it next year to see,
yes.
That's why I want us to come back, and then we'd have the information for these new assessments that we could see, okay, where do we fall in Virginia? And are we cutting ourselves out of some potential teachers in the classroom who would do a fine job based on.
Right. My apologies. So with that, I will note that there are a number of states that kind of walk through that exact process, especially when a test is new. They adopt at the recommendation, and then they take a year. If it's a very small volume test for the state, they might look at it within 2 years. But if there's enough information in the system, if that N is large enough, then they'll be able to take a look at those data and make some adjustments if needed. Yeah.
I have a
Yes, ma'am.
question related to the number of teachers in Virginia in, say, chemistry or physics that are teaching either out of their licensure area or on a provisional license would be helpful to know.
You need the number?
Yeah, so for instance, how many teachers in the state of Virginia are teaching physics or chemistry that don't have the physics or chemistry license or are on the provisional license?
So vacancies, Maggie, in our language.
No, that's not vacancies. She's asking about the ABTEL report. I have to run the ABTEL report for
Okay.
last year. So the data comes in for last year. And you're specifically asking about these 3 tests, about who is not licensed, not properly endorsed in their area, and those that are holding a provisional license with these 3 endorsements.
Yes, that would be helpful. Okay, thank you.
I agree. I think that would be really helpful data for us to know. Any other questions for Malik on this exam? And I believe we were looking at a 145 cut score.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we have a recommendation of a passing score?
I recommend 145 for passing score for physics. Janine Conley.
We can add the component of reviewing it for next year.
Okay. Please make note in the motion that we are going to review it in a year. And then we need a second. Or did we just have a second? We just had a second. I apologize. All right. All right. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right. We have a recommendation for a passing score. All right. And now we're moving on to biology.
Okay, so with biology, as you can see here, major changes. Again, more of about half of the exam has changed based on the science and engineering practices. 1/4 to 1/3 has changed based on the tasks of teaching, and that's really significant when you think about all of our secondary science exams. You see the content categories from the current to the new exam. If we could just move forward. The overarching exam here, 2.5 hours, 150 selected response questions. So candidates may see, they may see questions that are different than a traditional multiple choice where you have 4 or 5 answer choices. There may be drag and drop options. There may be other options where a candidate has to click on a graph or input information in order for that to represent their particular answer for that question. You see the format, test deliveries, computer. I should mention that we do offer all of our exams in a paper format if an accommodation is necessary, and we also offer 20 to 25 different accommodations for any disability or health-related need. You see the content categories, assess the approximate number of questions and percentage by those categories. If we move forward, again, we can keep going. You see the overarching topics, sample questions, etc. All of that, again, is available. Here are the states that are currently using the exam. Again, all the other states that are currently using biology, the current biology test, are going through this process now. Most have adopted at that score point of 154. And as we move forward, one more slide, you'll see the multi-state study information, November 2021, 14 states. Again, Virginia has been very consistent with sending panelists to participate with us. So there are 2 panelists from Virginia, overall 21 panelists. And the score point was 75 out of 120, which translates to a 154.
Any questions for Malik on the biology test?
Maggie, I would just ask, what is the current score for biology? Thank you.
Current score is 155. Do we have a recommendation for a passing score for the biology?
So with the caveat, I move that we look at a passing score of 154 with a caveat that we will review the past scores next year again.
Travis Burns, second.
Okay, so we have David White making motion and Travis Burns second. Okay, all those in favor? All those opposed? All right, we will make that recommendation to the board.
All righty. Thanks so much for your time today. Just want to make a quick plug again. Malik McKinley, my email address is certainly available, always available by phone as well. If you have individual candidate issues, if you need representation on your campus in terms of looking at tests that may be challenging or looking at data, please reach out to me. If you have opportunities for us to meet students on campus, we certainly would love to participate with you as well. So please take advantage. All of our services at ETS are pretty much free beyond the actual test fee. So please take advantage if you have some time to reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Malik. We really do appreciate the work that you do to come and to see, to come in person and to present this information to us. I feel like you're kind of an honorary advisory board of teacher education licensure member, and that says a lot for being from a testing agency. So we really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
And I apologize for keep interrupting for questions, but how aligned are programs across the state in biology, physics, and chemistry with the assessments that you all are putting out there? Do we ever look at our programs to see what we're teaching and if they're aligned with the assessments?
We do that. I mean, in higher education, as the test comes out, like I'm listening to them, I'm thinking I've got to share this with my science faculty to make sure that they know. I love that it's going to have more of a teaching component to it. I feel like, not that content isn't important, but I do feel like that's going to be a great change. But yeah, we do change and align our programs to make sure that we're covering the information that they would have.
So the students will be successful. That will be one component of their out demonstration of their concepts.
Yeah, passing tests are part of our program completion. And so we make sure that we have our students ready. So, all right. Thank you so much, Malik.
Thank you.
Next, we have recommendations to approve education programs offered by Virginia institutions of higher education. Janelle Torbert.
Good afternoon again. I am Janelle Torbert, the Director of Teacher Education, and I have the pleasure of going through the next 3 items. So please be patient with me. Just to give a little background information, EPP accountability measures are outlined within the regulations governing the review and approval of education programs. And so a part of that is to share the outcomes with the ABTEL committee. Agenda item number 4, education programs offered by Virginia institutions of higher education as required by the regulations governing the review and approval of education programs in Virginia, better known as the biennial accountability report. All education programs offered by Virginia institutions of higher education are required to adhere to the regulations governing the review and approval of education programs in Virginia by reporting biennially on 7 standards. The regulation governing the review and approval of education programs of Virginia require the institutions to meet and report on standards for biennial approval of education endorsement programs. The accountability measure 1 stipulates candidate progress and performance on prescribed licensure assessments. Achievement of an 80% biennial passing score should be required by July 1, 2010. Candidates completing a program shall have successfully completed all coursework, require assessments, including those prescribed by the Board of Education, and 2 supervised student teaching or internships. Candidates exiting a program shall have successfully completed all coursework, regardless of whether the individuals attempted, passed, or failed required assessments, including those prescribed by the Board of Education and/or who may not have completed supervised student teaching or required internship. For accountability measure number 1, all programs must have met the 80% pass rate for assessments. For this biennial cycle, all programs, with the exception of Randolph-Macon College Elementary Pre-K program and Sweetbriar College's Elementary Pre-K 6 program, met the pass rate. For accountability measures 2 through 7, all institutions of higher education submitted a status result and met for programs approved prior to September 2019, for which there were at least 1 program completer or program exiter for the current biennial reporting period. Next slide. I just wanted to share some of the documentation that the EPPs, and when I say EPPs, for those that are know, education preparation programs, have to submit to us. The first is the standard assessment passing rate, standard 1. They have to submit, here's a sample of the report template for each program they must complete. All programs are listed in the pass rates of assessments. Within your documentation that you received a document compiled with all of the EPP's reports from standard 1 through standard 7, that 186-page document, 89, well, 89, I missed a couple of pages. So I did that one night, just lounging around. So wonderful document to review. But for standards 2 through 7, this is another, if you go to the next slide, Dr. Johnson, this is how they are submitted. It looks for standard 2 through 7. Standard 2, candidates' progress and performance on assessment of basic skills as prescribed by the Board of Education for individuals seeking entry into an approved program. Standard 3, structured and integrated field experiences to include student teaching requirements. Standard 4, evidence of opportunities for candidates to participate in diverse school settings that provide experiences with populations that include racial, economic, linguistic, and ethnic diversity throughout the program experience. Standard 5, evidence of contributions to pre-K through 12 student achievement by candidates completing the program. Standard 7, evidence of employer job satisfaction with candidates completing the program. And standard 7, partnerships and collaborations based on pre-K through 12 school needs. And all of these standards are self-reported by the EPPs. Next slide. The last page of the document is an affidavit verifying the information is accurate from each EPP. I shared at the beginning that with standard one, we had 2 EPPs that did not meet standard. So I wanted to share the program designations per the regulations. Approved that number one, if you can be approved, the education endorsement program has met all standards set forth by our regulations. Number two, approved with stipulations. The education endorsement program has met standards in subsections A and B, and this section is making documented progress toward meeting standards in subsection C of the section. Institutions with education endorsement programs that fall below the 80% biennial requirement shall submit to the Board of Education an approval for approval an improvement plan to address the areas of stipulation, including measurable goals and timelines. And those 2 institutions have submitted those reports. Just to share a little bit of more background information so that everyone understands what we're going through, I'm going to share our program. When we talk about completers and program completers means individuals who have successfully completed all coursework, required licensure assessments, including those prescribed by the Board of Education, and supervised student teaching or the required internship. Our program non-completers means individuals who have been officially admitted to an education program who have taken, regardless of whether the individuals passed or failed our licensure assessments and have successfully completed all coursework, but who have not completed supervised student teaching or the required internship. Program non-completers shall have been officially released in writing from an education endorsement program by an authorized administrator of the program. Program non-completers who did not take required assessments are not included on the biennial reporting pass rates. Program completers are, that ends my report for the biennial accountability reporting system. I have like a. Yes. Thank you for coming. It's nice to put a face with the name we email.
You want to highlight any items on their plan, or would you like to provide any outcomes or highlights of the plan that you're proposing? Oh, sure. So you want to restate again?
Let me bring you the microphone.
Why does she have a plan?
Again, institutions that fall below the 80% biennial requirements should submit a plan, an improvement plan to the Board of Education to address the areas of stipulation, including measurable goals and timelines.
Yes, and I was not the one who wrote the plan, but I can report on what I do know. The pandemic made it really tough for some of the students. When you were talking earlier, Dr. Bradley, about students not passing the test and then they finish and then they don't, then they end up and then they apply for a job and get a provisional license. That really hurts the teacher preparation programs in our statistics. So our plan is that we're really trying to support students, have them take the test earlier so they have more time to retake them before they finish, and providing some individualized scaffolding and support for those students who need help to prepare for those tests.
Thank you. Any other questions?
And again, being new, you mentioned that next year, the changes that will not be a consideration, or what will not be a consideration next year for?
The entry assessment, the law changed to remove entry assessments from the university preparation programs. So that doesn't reflect or change the licensure assessments that we've been voting on. But previous to, I guess it was 2019, there was also code that there had to be an entry assessment that was required, and that was also part of this accountability measures. So that interest, for example, we had SAT, or I'm trying to think of the other ones now. There was a Praxis Core, several other assessments that were used to enter. So it was determined that that was a barrier. And if that was removed, at least the doors, the entry to the teacher prep programs would have a little bit of a boost. But that was right before COVID. So I don't know if they have tracked that has really impacted or not because of the enrollment numbers.
But to provide context to that, we're still accredited by the Council for the Accreditation of Educator Preparation Programs. And they still are looking for what are the qualities. We can't just take anybody. We have to still have, and so many programs still require licensure assessments as a part of entry, even though it won't be part of, I mean, it's just because of the nature of how we're accredited. Any other comments or questions about that?
Just a little bit of clarification. You said that the teacher prep programs, they're self-reporting on their progress. And did the law change that they're not going to be self-reporting anymore?
No, just that one item, the entry assessment was removed, just the one item. But everything else that she's highlighted, all 6 other items will still be required.
Okay. And then, so if they find themselves in need of an improvement plan, are they still self-monitoring that and self-reporting their progress, or how is that monitored?
They report to the Department of Education, and they send their updates to teacher education, and we support them in any which way possible with their updates, with their plans. Mhm.
And they have to, the numbers, the benchmarks have to be met before it can be removed. So they have to, over the next couple of 2-year period, their numbers must be at 80%.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Janelle? Now, Janelle, I know we need to accept these, but we're going to have to accept the 2 differently. Is that correct in terms of the way that we do that? All right, so so should we just pull those out to accept those programs? Do we need to do each of those programs separately?
I say yes.
Okay, all right.
And then yeah.
Okay, so what we will do is go ahead and ask for a motion to approve the annual program profiles that have been presented, other than the first portion for Randolph-Macon College and Sweetbriar for the elementary education component. So do we have a motion to accept do we have a motion to approve the annual program profiles? Okay. Jessica Jones made the motion. Do we have a second? Second, Carrie Swore. And then we need to accept the plans of improvement for Sweetbriar College and for Randolph-Macon for the elementary education pre-K to 6. Do we have, so they would be approved with, I forget what was it, with stipulations. So we will approve with stipulations. Oh, sorry. For the motion to approve the programs, do we, all those in favor say aye? Aye. Opposed? Okay, so motion carries. Next, we move to the acceptance of the 2 plans of improvement or accept with stipulations for Randolph-Macon College elementary education and Sweetbriar College for elementary education. Do we have a motion to what? Sweetbriar and Randolph-Macon. So do we have a motion to approve those? We need a second. Jessica Jones, second. Okay. So all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so recommendations to approve new education endorsement programs at institutions of higher education, and it's still Janelle.
I thought it was the annual education. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay. Annual approval of annual education preparation program profiles.
Yes, and I'm super excited about this one. Let's go to the next slide. I mean, if we can, I don't, I have the slides for time's sake. I screenshotted everything so that you don't have to go live. The regulations governing the review and approval of education programs in Virginia requires all institutions of higher education with approved education programs to report annually specifically to specific institution level and programmatic data. Institutions of higher education with education preparation programs are required to submit data annually by May 1 of each year on data reported from the previous year, September 1 through August 30th. Institutions of higher education submitted their third cycle this May, and you were sent a nice Excel document with lots of information to review, but the information required on the professional education program profile should be approved by the Board of Education and shall include the following: institutions accreditation status, education endorsement program status, number of candidates admitted into education endorsement programs, comparison of candidates admitted to the education endorsement program to overall college and university population, number of program completers for each endorsement program, number of program non-completers for each endorsement program, biennial accountability data results and satisfaction ratings by school administrators, clinical faculty supervisors, and student teaching, satisfaction ratings by employers and program graduates, satisfaction ratings of program graduates with 2 years of employment, recognition of other program achievements, and other data as required by the Board of Education. And that other data is the number of underrepresented minority full-time education faculty members in the education preparation programs. Does the education preparation program offer any specific underrepresented minority pipeline programs working with pre-K to 12 partners? And if so, specify and list those programs. Describe efforts to market, recruit, and retain individuals in education preparation programs. So what we wanted to show live, but I have screenshots, is our build the table for our annual education program. As required by our regulations, we have to go public and share that. In the past, we've shared like a big PDF version. And so now we have a build the table that you can go in and manipulate the data. So we're still in the working phase. There are some things that need to be tweaked with it. So, but we're just kind of excited to the point that we even have something to show you. So if you look at the build the table screen, and I've kind of circled where you go with it. So that first one we circle, you click there, and it's going to take you to this next slide with the build the table. What you would do is you would select the year. We have 3 years worth of data that we have collected that is highlighted. And so I kind of used the sampling. I used the College of William and Mary. And what we did, you can do it by institution. You can do it by state. However you're looking for the data. So we're clicking the College of William and Mary, and we want to submit the report for select the report for the program profile category, which can either be approved education program or program category. So the subcategory that I identified was a male. And so we will hit click and then go to the next screen, Dr. Johnson. Next slide. Okay, ideally, if you hit click, and when you go to the next slide, it's going to generate some our reports. And so this is it's going to have a download that says CSV, which can be turned into an Excel document, and lists right below. It'll tell you how many males that they have in their program. So College of William and Mary has 34 males listed in their program. And then once you hit click that download, the next slide, you have your Excel sheet that will pop up. So I have several slides, and I was kind of excited because I got into this with special ed. If you go to the next slide, and so I think, yeah, the next, well, hold on. Yeah, special ed, yeah. So, and it lists all the special ed programs by individual, and then collectively we have we have 669. I was a little leery about that. I'm a 669, but we asked how many special ed programs we have across the state. And when you go to the next slide, and I did it individually by each institution, it gives you the breakdown of how many individuals that are in those individual programs. So this is currently on the DOE's website. So in your leisure, you could take a little time to pull different reports, and there we still have one section with the narrative part that we are working on. And so you received what I did collectively. I compiled all of the data that was received for this annual profile for this academic year so that you have that information as well. But I encourage everyone to take a little time to build a table, and we want feedback. So please share your thoughts on the build a table and how useful, or if there's any tweaks that we need to make with that.
And just as a follow-up, you received what I have on the screen now, which is also a view of having all of the programs across the state so that we have a comparison of the programs on each of the variables. So for us in the state, many other states have a dashboard on all of the MVP programs, and this may be our first step in the dashboard direction of having at least all the programs in one place and looking at the same characteristics. Now, does it mean that all of the institutions define these the same? That is the question of the hour. And so that's part of what we're working through. But this is the first time we've at least had this all in one place. And so hopefully, again, as Janelle is mentioning, we'll get some feedback. This is, and in discussion if we need to tweak, modify things moving forward.
Janelle, your excitement is just palpable. So it's really nice to see. I know how much work has gone into this, and it really is going to be helpful to us even as EPP so that we can pull that data and have it to be able to look at that as we compare ourselves to other institutions and as we look at these different areas. So we really appreciate that. Any other comments or questions for Janelle? Okay, so I believe we need to have a motion to accept the annual program profiles as presented.
Motion to accept.
We have a motion from Jennifer Jones. Do we have a second? Second, Peggy Schimler. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much. Now we get to do recommendations to approve new education endorsement programs at institutions of higher education, and we are back to Janelle.
Okay. So my last item, new education endorsement programs. The regulations, love the regulations. The regulations govern the review and approval of education programs in Virginia, set forth the requirements for accreditation approval of programs preparing teachers, administrators, and other instructional personnel requiring licensure. These regulations establish policies and standards for the preparation of instructional personnel, further ensuring educational quality for Virginia public school students. Colleges and universities that offer programs for preparation of professional school personnel must obtain education program endorsement approval by the Board of Education. Additionally, requests from Virginia institutions of higher education to add a new education endorsement program must be approved by the Board of Ed. Requests are made annually by March 31st of each year, and the Advisory Board of Teacher Education and Licensure reviews and makes recommendation to the Board of Education on approval of Virginia education programs for school personnel. Final authority for program approval rests with the Board of Education. Requests for new program endorsements approved by the Board of Education will receive a rating of approve, approve with stipulation, or approval denied. And you received a list of programs that I'm about to present, and I have updated that list since then to 14, and I have some additional copies of those because we were kind of a work in progress, and we worked up until Friday to make sure that we can get as many programs as we could to work through to get to ABTEL approved today. When programs submit their program approval, there are several pieces of information they have to submit, and one of those is the partnership. One of the, let me go back a page. They have to submit the application, the partnership collaborations, the matrix, which aligns their program coursework with the regulation, the competencies better known, and then letters of support. Our next slide. Just wanted to give a sample of what our partnership and collaboration looks like form. The partnership and collaborations list includes the program, the partnership collaborations, descriptions of pre-K through 12 schools need, and how the school meets the needs of the community. So I have a couple of samples from different institutions that submitted. So today I will present to you 14 programs for approval. The regulations and the review of approval, the process goes as well as this way, that we receive the matrices, our DOE specialist, content area specialists review the matrices to make sure that the competencies are, that their coursework are aligned with the state competencies, kind of back and forth review process. Once they are reviewed and the specialists approve, then we bring them to ABTEL. So today I present to you 14 programs. There are 10 undergraduate programs, 4 graduate programs, 6 special education programs with 4 add-ons, 2 full special education programs, 2 early childhood 3-year-old add-ons, 2 career and technical education, 3 arts, and 1 driver eds. Out of those programs, we have 6 that are requesting majors in education. And so, which is significant because we've transitioned to having majors in education in 19, I believe, 18, 19. So today, the programs that we will be approving are Averett University, driver education and undergraduate, music, instrumental pre-K through 12 undergraduate, Mary Baldwin University, special education, general curriculum, K through 12 undergraduate, Randolph-Macon College, special education, general curriculum, K-12 undergraduate, University of Lynchburg, special education, general curriculum, K-6 add-on undergraduate, and visual arts pre-K through 12 undergraduate, University of Mary Washington Theater Arts pre-K through 12 graduate, University of Virginia, special education, general curriculum, K-6 add-on, special education, general curriculum, 6 through 8 add-on, special education, general curriculum, 6 through 12 add-on, and all of those are graduate. University of Virginia Wise, early childhood for 3-year-olds, add-on, undergraduate. Virginia Tech, career and technical education, family consumer science, undergraduate. Career and technical education, technology education, undergraduate. And early childhood for 3-year-old, add-on, undergraduate for Virginia Tech.
Okay. This is where it gets a little complicated because we cannot approve our own programs. So we will pull out the programs from Virginia Tech and from UVA Wise because Andy and I will have to recuse ourselves from those votes. And so then we will move forward with approval of all programs with the exception of Virginia Tech and UVA Wise. Okay, and so we need a motion to approve those. All programs except those from University of Virginia and UVA Wise and Virginia Tech. Eric Moffa. Second, David White. So do we have a motion to approve those programs? Or we have a motion, I'm sorry. All those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, anybody recuse? I guess we don't have to recuse from that. All right, so now then we need to approve the programs from UVA Wise. Do we have a motion to approve those new endorsement programs? Do we have a second? So Jessica Jones made the motion, Janine Connolly second. All those in favor? Those opposed? All right, motion carries. And now the new programs for Virginia Tech. I will recuse myself from that vote. Do we have a motion to approve the new programs from Virginia Tech? Do we have a second? First, David White, second, Peggy Schimler. All those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, the motion carries.
What's the timeline? This goes to the board now?
Yes.
right? And when can they start? Like just
After approval from the board. So we've been doing, the board has been requesting for first review and then coming back for second review. So that's how we will proceed. So it might be November.
Thank you for your work on that, Janelle. I know that is not easy. I will say the new program is much better than SharePoint. So we're getting there.
We're moving to phase 2 right now. I just met with them last week.
All right, we love the phase 2. All right. So all action items have completed. We will move on to liaison reports. I believe there's a report from the Virginia Community College System. Take your time, Joe.
We have a report from the Virginia Community College. I'll read it on behalf of Dan. The fall semester for Educate Virginia, which is the community college career switcher program for the state, based on August 6th data. We have candidates attending classes at 5 community colleges across the state, and they will finish their level 1 professional studies requirement in mid-December. We have been working with several school divisions to host community interest events in an effort to increase enrollment for the coming spring semester and a pipeline of teacher applicants for 23-24 academic year. Additionally, we will be supporting more than 75 first-time teachers in 38 school divisions and several private schools through the 22-23 school year. In October and January, we will be offering ESOL, New Teacher Academy, for teachers in multiple school divisions. The October Academy has a wait list, but there are some seats still available. The session that begins in January 23. The New Teacher Academy is held virtually. In November and March, we will offer a Praxis Prep workshop, which is face-to-face over 3 Saturdays. The November workshop series will be held in Harrisonburg, and the March workshop will be held in Woodbridge, Virginia. The VDOE will be covering the cost of these professional development opportunities offerings for participating educators. That concludes that report.
Do we have a report from Chev?
No report from Chev at this time.
And anything from the VDOE?
I will highlight quickly, given our time today, a couple of things. I would advise that there are 5 new board members that began in August. There was a postponement of meetings of the board in July as they waited to bring on the new members. In addition to that, I received a question from one of our advisory board members asking about specific legislation, if we were aware of those things, and I wanted to respond at a high level. We are aware there has been a discussion with state agencies around a potential proposal that may be reviewed by General Assembly in the upcoming session that does propose several initiatives, but one of the key is recommending that individuals without bachelor's degrees would be considered for provisional licenses if they are in fact military with several different conditions for their discharge. In addition, there were other items around the amount of credit hours they have to have, et cetera. Very similar to a bill and law now that is held in Florida. And so at this point, we just have information and there has been some discussion, but that will need to go and be presented by General Assembly. So there's nothing in writing that I can share about that initiative. There also has been discussion that potentially there will be a math legislation that's going to be similar to the Virginia Literacy Act that's going to be coming forth, with similar initiatives and requirements for appointment in various positions. But there is quite a bit of discussion about pathways for math specialists, and that it may not be a comparable bill that's easily managed. So just to give you at least those two, there has been some discussion around those, but I have nothing in writing that I can share with you, but we'll continue to give you updates. But notice I said that these must go to General Assembly. So these are not things that we're voting on or that we're being asked to provide feedback on as a body at this time. But if you are interested in those areas, I would suggest that you speak with your various lobbyists and associations to encourage or get more information about the potential of those moving forward. In addition to that, I will just quickly highlight some of the outcomes from your recommendations since we met in April. If I can get this quickly up on the screen. And I just have here the titles and that they were reviewed. Again, the majority of these were reviewed during the June meeting. As I mentioned, July was postponed. And so you see here that the board approved your recommendations around the licensure regulations to include new statutory requirements. That is the cultural competency requirement at school board, as well as for teachers related to renewal and for initial teachers. Second, in the final stage, really, it was approved as well by the board, the add-on for establishment of economics and personal finance. Again, approved first review of revisions to the licensure regs for school personnel to establish a dual language endorsement and add-on. That was also approved. First review of revisions to regulations governing the review and approval of educator programs to establish dual language and economics and personal finance, also approved. So that's modifications to both personnel and the approved program regulations. First review of revisions to the licensure regs for school personnel and regulations governing review and approval of Virginia to comport with federal guidelines related to accredited institutions. And so we share that with you all at this level. Remember, this is the federal government has changed its definition and not requiring the terminology accredited, using it the same way. Final review to certify a list of qualified persons for the Office of Division of Superintendent. That also comes from our office, not necessarily this group, but you may have heard quite a bit of discussion about that in the board discussions and deliberations as well. But again, all from our office, and your recommendations were approved. And just wanted to give you an update on that. And as you all know, you can go to the board's page to find the meeting minutes as well as the video recordings of all of the board meetings. Just any closing announcements and remarks from you all. Reminder of our next meeting scheduled for November the 14th. And I will actually have a slide here just to remind you of all the meetings that we are scheduled for. November 14th, February 6th, March the 6th, and April the 3rd is our alternate. So hopefully we will be at this location, same time, same bat channel, as they say. Again, we want to thank you so much for your participation today. And again, we're open to any announcements or closing comments from the advisory.
Okay. Any closing comments or announcements for the group? Okay, we need a motion to adjourn.
So move, David White.
First, David White, second. And with that, we will, I don't think we need to do a roll call vote or anything on that. So with that, our meeting is adjourned, and we will now move into our breakout groups for the licensure committee and for the teacher education committee. So